Okay, so yesterday we looked at pattern, and pattern is a repetition of the elements of art. We looked at some examples. We looked at how you could use line to create pattern, how you can use shape, how you can use colors to create pattern. For your creature, you need to add some patterns to create some visual texture, but it's another way to add some interest to your creature as well. So what I want to point out here, notice here the scales vary in size. They're in different size groupings. That helps to create the illusion that it's a scaled creature without filling the entire thing with pattern. Here, very detailed patterns. These are very interesting patterns, combination of triangles and lines and different shapes and wavy lines and big patterns that have the circles and squares repeating in the little patterns behind there, following the contours of the shape here. So these are really well thought out patterns. The one thing I would caution, notice here in the face, we start to lose the eye because the patterns are running so close to it. So be very careful that your patterns don't overwhelm the other details of the face or of the hands, so that way we can still find those details when we're looking at them. Here again, some great visual texture created by scales here. So these are to create the texture of the creature to make it feel like a scaled creature or a feathered creature. And then here there's also some decorative ones to add some interest. So like the zigzags in the background and the different spots on the belly. This one here is a great example of interesting patterns. Take the time. Please don't just use stripes or polka dots or triangles or some very simple patterns. Take the time to make it feel like it belongs to the creature. So think about what's going to best represent the creature, but also what's also going to make it interesting. So here we've got some really big triangles that change in sizes to create almost a zigzag pattern. We have a fire pattern in the textures here, and this gets repeated in the fire over here coming out of the mouth. You've got these circles that change from big to small, some curved lines. So the very last blank page in your contour practice packet, so if you turn it over, it should be the very last page. You're going to write number 8 pattern at the bottom. Now you can just use a pencil, you don't have to use Sharpie. I'm using a Sharpie so that way you can see my examples. So I want you to brainstorm 5 to 10 different patterns for your creature. Now if I were to just take and give my creature spots, this would be pretty boring, but you can do different things to make it more interesting. Maybe it's making them different sizes of spots. So a variety of sizes helps to make it more interesting. Another thing I can do to make my pattern more interesting, I can add a pattern inside a pattern. So if I'm giving my creature spots, perhaps there are stripes within my spots. And I can have my stripes go different directions. So patterns all around us. Remember, creatures a lot of times have a texture to them. So like if it was a furry creature, it would be soft. And to show fur, I could do something like this, some different jagged textures. And if I want them all to go the same way, I could make it seem like fur. So that could be something that we do for fur. It might be a creature that has like scales. So I could take and do this shape scale. If I wanted them to be really spiky and intense scales, I could change the shape or the size of them. I could also do scale clusters. If I didn't want the whole creature to be covered, I could have different groupings of scales. Wanted something to look like feathers, I could have some shapes kind of like this. I could also take and add like the veining of the feather within. Now it can also be used for designs. So some creatures have different designs to them, like you might recognize that cheetahs have some different curved spot shapes, or zebras have stripes. If I were you, I would draw out your patterns first in pencil, And then you can kind of repeat the shape if you want to. You could add dots in, you could add dots in between, you could have lines coming out. So think about how you can make it interesting. So if I wanted to do a line shape, I could come back in and add some patterns to it. So if you're going with more decorative patterns, think about how to make it feel like it would fit your creature. You don't want it to be something that distracts or takes away from the creature, but it's still something that you can add for interest. So for example, this student here had these big organic shapes on their creatures, and then they went ahead and added kind of that repeating curved triangle shape within it. Here you have a very textured wing pattern, and then for the hair you can definitely feel kind of the fur. And then here on the tail, if we zoom in, we can see we have lines and triangles that create a pattern along the back. We can also see texture or fur along the edges. Whatever you do, make it feel controlled. We don't want it to look messy. When I did my patterns, I rushed through it. I was not happy with my patterns now that I look back at it. So make sure that they don't feel just random. Make sure that they feel like they belong to the creature. So instead of doing stripes here, I could have had my stripes kind of follow the shape of the creature, and that would have felt more natural than just straight lines. Now before you add your patterns, I'd make sure that you've gone over all of your gray pencil lines. So here you can see the hand. I've traced over my gray pencil lines with the blue, so that way I don't lose the details of my hand as I start to add my patterns. I started using Sharpie. I wanted to show you the contrast. If you add your patterns with Sharpie, they're really going to stand out and be noticeable. If you want them to be a little bit more subtle, you can work in the same color or a similar color and just press a little bit harder. And then if you want them to kind of fade out, like here, I don't want these patterns to run through the whole creature, so I can start making them spread out a little bit more so that they're really condensed where I want them to be. And then even up here, I could start to spread those out a little bit and have them stop so that they don't run into the face. Now, I wouldn't change from Sharpie to colored pencil. I'd pick one, so that way it feels like it has unity, like we've talked about, so it feels like it belongs together. But I wanted to show you the contrast, how this stands out much more than if you go with a very similar color. Now, you don't have to use the same color, so if you really want the details to stand out, so like here, I was working with green over the top of blue. This is why I asked for you to wait to do your patterns last. It's a lot easier to get your value in place first and then go over the top and add some of those details. So I want this to feel like there are feathers all along the wings here for that texture as well. Try and have at least 3 different patterns within your creature. So right now I have 2, so I might think of something to use for the legs once I have them colored, or something for the body. So this is a way to add some more detail and interest to your creature. And again, repeating patterns also helps to create unity. So if I have a pattern over here for the wing, I'd want to repeat it over here. I could bring the scales back into the legs if I wanted to, and then I need to come up with one other area to add a pattern. So good luck with your patterns. Make sure to take time to pre-plan on your packet before you move to your creature. If you're really stuck for some ideas, on the back wall, I actually have a lines and patterns poster that I can show you. So on the back wall, I have this lines and patterns poster that you can look at. Now these are pretty abstract. They're not going to feel as natural to the creature, but you can add different patterns like this if you want the patterns to be more decorative, but they still create a visual texture as well.